Hey everybody, welcome to Now It's Dark. I'm Jim. Going to do a review for a Shudder original called You'll Never Find Me. This is a 2024 USA release. It is a 2023 film, technically. It's 1 hour and 40 minutes, and it's on Shudder. Like I said, it's a horror thriller. This movie was recommended to me by a friend of the channel, May Ann, also known as Cinderella. She's somewhat of a part-time YouTuber. I don't mean to laugh at that. She posts when she can, and she does a lot of shorts. And she gave me this very great recommendation. And yeah, it is a crazy psychological thriller. It has people very divided. So let's get into this quick review. It's about a character named Patrick, this man. He's a strange and lonely resident living in a mobile home at the back of an isolated trailer park. After a violent storm, a mysterious young woman appears at his door seeking shelter from the elements. I highly recommend watching the trailer. This was written and directed by Indiana Bell and also directed by Josiah Allen. I'll get into the actors in just a moment. Indiana Bell herself wrote a storyline for this on IMDb, and it's a little bit bigger than the generic one that I just read. So I'm going to read that one as well. Patrick, a strange and lonely resident, lives in a mobile home at the back of an isolated caravan park. After a violent thunderstorm erupts, a mysterious young woman appears at his door seeking shelter from the weather. The longer the night wears on, and the more the young woman discovers about Patrick, the more difficult she finds it to leave. Soon she begins to question Patrick's intentions, while Patrick begins to question his own grip on reality. And that is a much better synopsis of the story. And the character Patrick is played by Brendan Rock. And the woman who is the visitor is Jordan Cohen. And there's only one other real credit, and it's Elena Carapatis, and her title is just woman. Primarily, this movie just involves Patrick and the visitor, the girl, and it's very tense. It's a very suspenseful, mood-induced movie based on just these two having their interactions, their stories that they are telling, the way they speak, the mood lighting. There's an enormous storm going on, so you get flashes of lightning coming through. You get a lot of visual camera angles that really create this environment of suspicion and tension. And as a viewer, I found myself more than once thinking I knew the direction that this movie was going in, only to not have it go into that direction, which isn't a bad thing. But for the first hour, maybe just a little bit over the first hour, this movie is all driven by the dialogue and the lighting and just the tension. And it's very interesting. And I do really love psychological horrors. Elevated horror, some would call this maybe, because it's not the traditional slasher type horror movie. This movie does not rely on jump scares. I talk about that a lot in some of the movies, how music main priority in some films is just to elicit a jump scare or a warning that something's coming. And this movie has such a good soundtrack, score, whatever you call it, the music really goes well with just setting this really ominous tone. And throughout the dialogue of this first hour, it's like, is Patrick the one that we should be afraid of? Or then it switches to, is this woman the one that I should be afraid of? And there's just this really good relationship these two have. And I don't mean good in the sense that it's a good, healthy relationship. I mean that it's a good, suspenseful, what's next, what's going on, relationship between these two. I want to look at my notes real quick just to make sure. I did watch this the other night. Yeah, I guess I would say that this, yeah, a lot of dark shots. At one point, the power even goes off, so we have even less lighting going on. This is definitely one of those movies where you need to be invested in actually watching and listening to, because it can become very confusing of what's going on. And that tone shifts a couple of different times. And even for myself, thankfully I was actually paying attention, and you can pick up on some visual cues and audible cues, I guess you would call them. Some of the things that Patrick says, and even the woman, kind of set you in a direction. So what I meant by this is kind of creating like a divisive thing with reviewers or viewers, just from some of the few things that I read. Because after I watched this, I had to look at some reviews to see if I was like getting the same vibe or impression as other people were. And I don't think I was as dramatically affected as some people were about the ending. So the movie is like, what did I say, an hour and 40-ish minutes. And again, that first hour is all just interaction between Patrick and the visitor. And I don't want to go into spoilers for this. And so I'm going to have to be very careful with how I phrase or choose to describe the ending, because it is really, it's one of these endings that the action all of a sudden picks up, and now we know which of the two is the threat, and and what the effect they have on the other person. But then we're also introduced into a whole nother thing of information, and our eyes are open to backstory that we didn't have at the beginning of the film. And they do a good job of this as well, like where we had those visual cues and some verbal cues in that first hour. They kind of do call back to those. But then there's just other stuff that you're just like, where is that coming from? Why did they do that? So I think for myself, I'm not as upset, but I'm definitely confused, questioning why the writer-director Adriana Bell would choose to show us a movie filmed in a perspective that is so altered by the end. And when you see this, or if you've seen this, you'll kind of know what I mean. But it's an unrealistic approach, I guess, to telling a story. And I don't know that I've seen a movie that when the reveal was done at the end, that this was the way. It's so hard without spoiling, because it's so different. Like there's like these standard formulas for psychological thrillers and suspense building climactic endings and things. And this has a climactic ending, but it's also very bizarre, and it's not, it's just delivered so oddly. And that really has people split on whether or not they give this movie high praise or just okay praise. I'm kind of in the middle of okay and high praise, so I'm a little bit higher than maybe the average. But boy, if I hadn't been paying attention, there would have been stuff that I missed, and it would have been unfortunate. But overall, it's a decent psychological thriller. Definitely a great 2/3 for me. I really was invested in the dynamic between these two characters. They were great. Their interactions were so good. The acting was great. Everything seemed very on point. I really enjoyed that whole first 2/3 of the movie, and then I dipped a little bit on the third act, but not horribly that I would hate this movie or not recommend it. Especially if you have Shudder. I mean, it's free. It's not like you're renting it from Amazon Prime or anything like that. So if you have seen this and you want to leave a comment down below, try to keep it a little spoiler free, because this is definitely one of those movies that if you know what's going on before you watch it, this movie is definitely not worth watching if you've already been exposed to the ending. Hope that makes sense. But yeah, that's going to do it for You'll Never Find Me. Thank you, Marianne, for the suggestion, and her channel link is in the description, and I might have done it up top or something like that at one point. But that's going to do it. Have a great day, everybody. Keep coming back to the channel for more great stuff.
Row 18, plot 20.